Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Amna Gul from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. We're back with the course Fundamentals of Public Relations, bearing the code JMC 331, as well as the course Advanced Public Relations and Advertising, bearing the code JMC 431. It's our 9th lecture, and the topic today is Models of Public Relations. So we'll be discussing the 4 models of public relations proposed by Grenick and Hunt. First of all, I'll start off with an introduction. See, although there were many ancient public relations as far in the past as ancient Greece, modern day public relations started off with different events in the United States. It began with a group of revolutionaries mounting a public relations campaign to turn public opinion in favor of independence from England and King George. Now, the revolutionaries effectively used words and actions to mount a successful activist campaign leading to the Revolutionary War. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, published in 1776, gave rise to the sentiment that England's governance under King George III was unjust. The subsequent declaration of independence and outward acts of protest were largely influenced by the rhetorical arguments found in Paine's pamphlet, which has been called the most influential tract of the American Revolution. Slogans such as "Don't tread on me" and use of printed materials such as colonial newspapers were key message tactics used to sway opinion in favor of a revolution and a war for independence. Following the independence, the Federalist Papers were used to ratify the United States Constitution. These 85 essays were exemplary forms of effective public relations. But I do understand that you have not gone through either the history or the papers or the essays yourselves. This was generally an introduction which actually continues a bit further. Now, all these people who did these are the founding fathers of United States. So these founding fathers of the United States, they used public relations to build the public consensus necessary for a budding nation to form a new kind of government and establish the human rights necessary for the nation to survive. So this is the most aligned form of public relations that we have in the history. But it had modern public relations in the United States can also be traced back to less illustrious beginnings than the creation of a new democratic republic. Barnum of circus fame made his remark by originating and employing many publicity or press agentry tactics to generate attention for his shows and attractions. Barnum was famous for coining the phrase, "There's no such thing as bad publicity." So all he did was he used to be in the public attention. He used to seek public attention, be it for good or for bad. He was not interested in that because he believed that there was no such thing as bad publicity. You just had to be in public attention. He was even known to pen letters to the editor under an assumed name, outing some of his actions as hoaxes just to generate publicity and keep a story alive. Unfortunately, Barnum's ethics left much to be desired. Now, that is also a beginning of public relations in United States. This is where it is documented well, but even though it was the history of public relations, it was not a very ethically done. Okay, so there were ethical issues, but still, if we trace it back to it, this is where we come. Now, Barnum thought that honesty was not the domain of a press agent. And he infamously stated, "The public be fooled." Okay, now for a press agent, for someone who seeks media attention or who seeks attention through the media, Barnum was of the view that honesty was not the thing. So it was more about fooling the public. And there were so many people who followed his track, like droves of press agents followed in Barnum's tracks in efforts to get free space in the news for their clients, ranging from Hollywood figures to private interests such as railroads and also politicians. This approach to public relations was termed as press agentry by Grenick and Hunt, as I stated in the beginning of the lecture as well, that this division of 4 models, this was made by Grenick and Hunt. So this approach to public relations was termed as press agentry by Grenick and Hunt because of its reliance on generating publicity with little regard to the truth, or with little regard for the truth. For our modern day examples, we have to look only to the entertainment publicity surrounding a new film release, or the product publicity around a new energy drink, or a new technological gadget. Publicity and press agentry are synonymous terms, meaning simply to generate attention through the use of media. So this is the one-way communication model. Amongst of the one-way communication models, the first one is press agentry. We've dated it back to the earlier beginnings of public relations, but it is still used to date, where it is just meant to seek attention of the audience via media. Simple as that. Whatever is the content for that attention, it is not researched, or it is not much of concern. So it's a one-way model. It is communicator-based setup. Now, of the one-way communication models, there is another one as well. The first one was the publicity or press agentry, and the second one is that is public information. Now, the next historical phase resulted in a new model of public relations that is termed as public information. In this approach to public relations, a former journalist worked as a writer representing clients, issuing news releases to media outlets in the same style as journalistic writing. So how it came across that there was a former journalist turned into a writer who was writing actually news releases to media outlets in the journalistic style. Now, the idea of public relations specialist acting as a counselor to management, as opposed to a simple practitioner of press agentry tactics, now this idea was born. The pioneering public information counselor was a man named Ivy Ledbetter Lee. Lee revolutionized public relations practice at the time with the idea of telling the truth. Now, as compared to the previous perspective of press agentry, where Barnum actually stated the public be fooled, Lee was of the view of telling the truth. So this is another model of public relations, and it is a growth in this case. Lee had studied law, studied at the Harvard Law School, but later on he went on to find a job as a journalist. Now, after working as a successful journalist for a number of years rather, Lee decided that he had a real ability for explaining complicated topics to people. Now, everybody has certain skills. He found that he was good at explaining complicated topics to different people or to people in general. and he got the idea of being a new kind of press agent. So he decided to be a press agent, but his idea was new because he wanted to be that kind of a press agent who was telling the truth. So rather than tricking the people, Lee saw his role as one of educating the public about truthful facts and supplying all possible information to the media. Ivy Lee opened the third public relations agency in the United States in 1904, representing clients such as the Pennsylvania Railroad. When we go into the history, you'll know that it was such an important setup, the Rockefeller family, and the coal roads and mine company. Lee became the first public relations practitioner to issue Code of Ethics in 1906. So he started his agency, his public relations agency, in 1904, and in 1906 he was the first practitioner to issue a Code of Ethics as early as in 1906. And the Code of Ethics was based on his declaration that the public be informed. It was to replace railroad tycoon infamous statement, "The public be damned." So it was a great shift. Ivy Lee ushered in a more respectable form of public relations that is objective and factual. So this model, this is also one-way communication model, but the public information model is more objective and factual. His public information approach is still in use today, especially in government reporting, quarterly earnings statements, and similar reports intended simply to inform. So what he set apart out that time is still in use. This one-way communication model is still in practice in public relations, but it is usually used for that kind of reporting, for example, that has mentioned quarterly earnings, annual reports, or government and reporting, stuff like that. Now these were two of the one-way models. Both the press agentry and public information models of public relations are based on writing and technical skills. For example, skills with images, with words, with websites, and media relations, because it is one way thing. So you need to be good at creation, you need to be good at creative ends in terms of be that art and be that skill and how to design something, how to say it, and then your relations with the media, that is also very much important for one-way communication models. These concepts are actually based on one-way dissemination of information, which I clearly stated, and it is clearly mentioned here as well. They are not management-based models. The definitions that we did earlier in this course, that actually those actually stood for the management function of public relations. But these one-way communication models, they are not management-based models, because strategic management is based on research, and research is what makes management a strategic pursuit based on knowledge and data that comprise two-way communication, as opposed to a simple one-way dissemination of information based on assumptions. Now, even though both of these models are one way and they have a history, but they are still in use. But these are not for the management level. These are only for dissemination and disseminating information, be it publicity, be it public information. But these are meant for that thing. In these cases, it is actually the kind of work that is done is basically it is on the basis of the writing and technical skills of the people involved, who have the skills to communicate with the public, or who have the relations with the media to make that communication happen. So they are more skilled in that case. Now, there are other two-way communication models as well. So the next two models of public relations are based on research. Using research to gather public and opinion data, led scholars to label these models two-way rather than one-way. So these two-way communication models are because they use research. That is one end of the communication, and the other end of the communication is the communication on the part of the public relations specialist or the department. So this thing actually led to two-way because they are more resemble conversation than a simple dissemination of information. These two management models are termed as asymmetrical and symmetrical, and we'll get to understand what this actually means. Now, let's start off with the asymmetrical model. The asymmetrical model was pioneered between 1920 and 1950 by Edward Bernays, nephew of psychologist Sigmund Freud, and is based on the principles of behavioral psychology. Public relations research seeks to determine what publics know and understand or believe about the client organization. Let me come again. The research in public relations, what does it seek? It actually tries to know and it tries to understand what public knows, understands, or believes about the client organization. What are the issues of importance, and so on. Now, then in the asymmetrical model, once these beliefs are learned through polling or other means, they are incorporated into the public relations messages distributed by the organization. So what they do is, first they tend to research what the public feels or knows or understands or believes about the client organization, or about what are the important issues for them, and so on. When they get this information, whether they get this information via polls or by focus group discussions or by any other means, okay, once the information is there, this information is actually incorporated into the messages, into the public relations messages distributed by the organization. As we discussed earlier, for example, there are different types of reports or things going out, so those incorporate those messages. Now, it is called asymmetrical because it is imbalanced in favor of the communicator. Since the communicator undergoes no real change, but he simply uses the ideas he knows will resonate in communicating with publics with the purpose of persuading them on some issue or topic. Now, this is something very, very important that you need to understand. See, the communicator or they actually take the data from the public, they do the research, but they do the research only to impress, only to persuade the audience or the publics. The information is not to change the communicator themselves or change the organization itself. Let's suppose, for example, there's a public opinion that people are not much happy with that the organization is not doing, for example, sustainable development, or it's not doing corporate social responsibility. So instead of doing corporate social responsibility or going for sustainable development, only those messages are used for public relations. So that is the issue here. This is why it is called asymmetrical, because of its imbalance in favor of the communicator. For example, let's suppose if I'm, for example, a politician and I'm running for a re-election, and my research identifies that tax cuts are an important topic with the publics these days, then I'll include the importance of tax cuts in my next campaign speech. Simple as that. I just get to know what the people want and I give them what they want in terms of my communication only. Okay. Now, research is a key component of this model as it seeks to persuade publics to adopt the attitudes and beliefs that are favorable to the organization based on the collection of data about their existing beliefs. Now, whichever model is two-way, the one-way models that we did previously, they did not use research, so those were one-way models. The two-way communication models that we're discussing now, since they use research, they are known as two-way communication models. But the first model is asymmetrical model. It is asymmetrical because the research that is used is actually used in favor of the communicator. So the model is imbalanced. It is not symmetrical, it is rather asymmetrical. Because the communicator, as I said earlier, really does not undergo any change. He simply uses the ideas that resonate with the public and use those ideas for the purpose of persuading them on some topic or some issue. Now let's check out the other one, which is symmetrical model. The symmetrical model was also pioneered by Edward Bernays and several prominent public relations practitioners and educators between about 1960s to 1980s. It seeks also to use research on public opinion, just as the asymmetrical model does. Since it is a two-way model, so it does use research. However, it does not use research with the intent to persuade, but to build mutual understanding between both publics and organizations. So it is similar to the asymmetrical model because it also uses research, but it is different than the asymmetrical model because of the intent to use that research. The intent is not to persuade the publics. The intent is to build a mutual understanding between both the publics as well as the organization. Organizations are open to changing their internal policies and practices in this model based on what they learn from their publics. As I gave you the example earlier, for example, about the corporate social responsibility. So if a company or an organization learns that people are particular about that, it will take steps to be a more it is a social responsible organization. Okay? So it is a collaborative approach to building understanding, and although it is not perfectly balanced, it is a moving equilibrium in which both sides in the communication process have an opportunity to have input and change an issue. To revise this example, for example, after research identifying tax cuts as an issue when I was actually a politician who was running for re-election. So once I identify that tax cuts are an issue owing to research, I get to know this thing. So being a symmetrical politician, I would actually incorporate tax cuts into the belief system and offer ideas supporting those beliefs on the campaign trail. Now it is same thing that I'll speak about those tax cuts, but I just don't speak. I just don't make promises. I actually incorporate those into my belief system, into my plan of ideas, and then I offer those supporting ideas. Okay, now this is the difference here. The asymmetrical model is inclined towards the communicator. The symmetrical model, even though it is not perfectly balanced, but it is a moving equilibrium in which both sides of the process have the opportunity to have their inputs and to change an issue, which is something very, very much important. Now, in modern public relations, we often see a mixing of public relation models among multiple tactics or communication tools within one public relations campaign. It is best to think of the models as theoretical constructs that, in implementation, become combined through the mixed motives of public relations. In most cases, public relations professionals not only want to aid their employer or client, but also to assist the publics outside the organization to access and understand the inner workings of the firm. Now, this mixed motive approach is based on the real world contingencies that impact public relations decisions and the desire to facilitate communication on both sides of an issue, both for organization and for publics. So, the current setup is currently we see a mixed motive approach. It is all of this or some of this, it's a combined setup. Here, I would like to share with you an explanation of all these four models that I've just shared with you, since it's coupled with examples as well. I hope it would serve the purpose of explaining it far better or much better.
And some related campaigns. Since creativity is among the most relevant skills for PR practitioners, I think that this topic will be helpful in giving me an insight into the evolution of PR over time, how those models are applied in the real world, and how creativity works in this field. Now let's get started. Four model is the most popular theory of PR, developed by Professors James Grooney and Todd Hunt in 1984. First, I'm gonna look at press agentry model. This model has been practiced since the 19th century by professionals who use one-way communication to promote sports events, celebrities, products, and services. It's similar to propaganda, since press agents and publicists try to manipulate the audience's thoughts and secure media coverage for their clients without a formal research. So accuracy and credibility are not priorities here. Phineas Barnum is a master of this. A more recent example of publicity is an epic stunt done by Richard Branson to promote his Virgin airline by placing an airship above the London Eye with a slogan, "BA can't get it up," to compete with British Airways. Another one-way communication model, public information, is used to provide the audience with informative but not necessarily persuasive facts and knowledge. This model is built on the work of Ivy Lee with a shift towards more ethical practices. Audience analysis, research, and feedbacks are not very important. Public information is often practiced by government agencies, educational institutions, and non-profit organizations through an array of mass media such as TV, radio, banner, or websites. For example, in 2007, Vietnam government released a new helmets law that required motorcyclists in Vietnam to wear helmets or they be given penalties. In addition to government press releases, the social media began publishing reports and articles to inform the public about the new helmets law. So now I'm going to discuss about the other two models known as persuasive or two-way communication. I've discovered that the main feature of two-way asymmetrical model is that it focuses on scientific persuasion and the use of formal research to better understand the audience psychology. This model is developed by Edward Bernays with an aim to create the right message and persuade the audience to behave as the organization desires. It's considered asymmetrical or imbalanced because here persuasion communication is used to benefit the organization more than audiences. So obviously there is no real dialogue. For example, the world's first PR campaign, Torches of Freedom, designed by Edward Bernays. A more recent example is the US presidential elections in 2016. Donald Trump's use of PR media played a vital role. His speech named "Make America Great Again" has convinced American people of his great promise to rebuild the nation. Finally, let's discuss two-way symmetrical model, the ideal of PR. This model encouraged organizations to make decisions that are mutually beneficial to themselves and their stakeholders. It relies on a balance and real dialogue to not just persuade, but also achieve mutual understanding, resolution of conflicts, negotiation, and trust between parties. PR practitioners are mediators who will ensure all involved parties can benefit, not just their clients. So this is often described as a win-win scenario. Organizations conduct extensive research to identify the public's perception and use that as the guidance for long-term strategy. This model is often practiced in conference, town hall meetings, and public forums by non-profit organizations, government agencies, and regulated businesses. Let's take a look at Starbucks. The US coffee company has created a separate Twitter account called My Starbucks Idea to increase their engagement with the public and offer a space where customers can share and discuss ideas to make Starbucks greater. The challenge when I learned 4 models of PR is how to set them apart. So after doing research, I found that over time, PR models are developed to be more interactive, more credible, more persuasive, and more ethical. They also require more research and place more emphasis on social responsibility. The 4 models has been the benchmark PR theory for this. Yet, it is still relevant today and has provided me with a guidance to analyze PR case studies and distinguish which model is relevant to each case.
On this note, I'll summarize. In summary, the historical development of the field showed 4 distinct models of public relations. With this brief background in the history of public relations, you likely know enough about the models now to begin identifying each in public relations case studies, as mentioned in the video as well. All are still in use in public relations practice today, and these terms are used in the academic literature and in public relations management. The one-way models are not based on social scientific research, but on a simple dissemination of information. The 2 models are based on research. Two-way models are based on research, which is what makes them the two-way management model. In order of their development, the models are, the first one is press agentry, which is one-way information dissemination focusing on publicity for persuasion or attention. The second one is public information, which is also one-way information dissemination providing information. Now the difference is about what is being provided. The two-way asymmetrical, which is two-way means it is research-based, which is imbalanced in favor of persuading publics to support the organization's interests. The two-way symmetrical is two-way because of the research, and it is more balanced in terms of creating mutual understanding and moving the equilibrium. Due to the mixed motives inherent in the public relations process, public relations professionals will most likely use a combination of these models in public relations management. These models suggest an overall philosophy of public relations, while situations require different approaches. Therefore, it is also useful to have public relations strategies that reflect a contingency of varying approaches, as we'll discuss later in the upcoming lectures. That's all for today. Thank you.